The House Oversight Subcommittee on Corporate Subsidies and State Investments will come to order. Would the clerk please take the attendance?
Chair Cara.
Here.
Representatives Green.
Present.
Beerline.
Here.
Wagella.
Here.
Pohutsky.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have 5 members present, a quorum.
Representative Green moves to approve the minutes of the June 4th meeting. Without objection, so ordered.
The House Committee on Homeland Security and Foreign Influence will come to order. Will the clerk please read the roll?
Chair Brock.
Present.
Representatives Meerman. Here. Shriver. Here. Menser.
Here.
Conlon.
Present.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Awesome. Thank you very, very much. Representative Menser moves to approve the minutes of June 4th meeting without any objections. They're approved. And just it's been noted, I do have a T-shirt on today. We have our softball game this afternoon. So in honor of our bipartisan annual softball tournament, I'm wearing my jersey today with a tie, just to be fair. So I will turn it over to Representative Carr.
Thank you, Representative Brook. And thank you all for joining us here today. Before we get started, just want to make a brief update. We did get correspondence from Mr. Jim Durian finally. Coincidentally, after I called him out for his lack of response last week, we had called and emailed and called his staff and tried relentlessly for a couple of weeks to hear from him. He finally showed up and communicated. He sent about a page and a half letter here with statements, but also declining to come in and speak just a few hours after committee. So apparently he's paying attention, but not even taking the time to say that he's not going to come in, but he's willing to spend all this time writing this letter. Maybe he'll change his mind in the future and actually come and face the public with all these taxpayer dollars that are going towards these types of operations. I believe the people of Michigan deserve to hear from him directly and his involvement in this process. With that, we have our first 2 people testifying today. If Kristen and Josh from the MBDC would like to come forward, looking forward to your testimony. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Cara, Chair Bruck, Vice Chairs Wegala, apologies, sir, and Vice Chair Menser. Thank you for having us today to talk about the Blue Oval Battery Project in Marshall and how it's delivering transformational opportunities for Michiganders throughout the region. First, we do want to acknowledge there's a lot of numbers associated with this project since it was first announced in February of 2023, so just want to level set on the cash funding sources that came in to support the development of the major campus in Marshall and the Blue Oval Battery Project. Also really important for us today to clarify that the project at the major campus in Marshall is with Blue Oval Battery Michigan, which is an entity wholly owned by Ford. This is not a joint venture. It is wholly owned, controlled by Ford through the Blue Oval entity. All disbursements under the CIP grant are to the Blue Oval Battery Michigan entity. CATL, which is a leader in lithium ion phosphate battery technology, is an existing supplier to other global automakers, and they will license technology to Ford Blue Oval to provide the services in the plant to assist in the production of the batteries. No public money has been nor will be awarded to CATL through this project. Any disbursements made, as I said, will be to the Blue Oval Battery Michigan entity. All disbursements go into a deposit account in the name of Blue Oval, in which the MSF maintains a security interest. So first, let's talk about the Critical Industry Program grant here, which is the cash grant support for the Blue Oval Battery Michigan. This was first approved by the Michigan Strategic Fund, February 2023, in a public meeting of the MSF board. It was legislatively transferred by approval of both the House and the Senate Appropriations Committees in April of 2023. This was amended later. We're going to talk about that amendment on a later slide. So we'll get to that, but just want to summarize here the funding sources. We also have a strategic site readiness program totaling $185.3 million. This includes $120.3 million that is to support the Blue Oval development of the site for the Blue Oval Michigan Battery Project. $65 million of that SSRP grant is to support some of the surrounding development where there's not an end user identified in the major campus. Additionally, you'll note the legislature appropriated $299.7 million to MEDA through the general fund to support the site development activities around the major campus. and also $330 million to MDOT to support some of the road work in and around the region. There is an MOU between the MDOT, MEDC, and MEDA to articulate the uses and objectives of that $330 million, but that is money under the control of MDOT. As part of the REMI analysis for this project, we calculated a positive return on investment for the state. That means for every dollar of state incentives given to this project, we're actually receiving $1.21 in net new taxes. Our REMI model also estimated that over 20 years, we'll see more than $24.9 billion in new personal income tax generated as a result of the direct and indirect jobs that this project will create.
Thank you, Chair Carr, Chair Bruck, and all the other members of the committees for this opportunity to be here today. Thanks, Kristen. So we're going to go kind of back and forth a little bit depending on the slides, like we've done in past opportunities here as well. What we want to highlight here is the unique way about the conversations on this project, that this has been decades in the making, led by local advocates and local leaders, while also highlighting the long-term nature of economic development and the long-term nature that it takes to land a transformational opportunity in a community. For the MEDC's part, we were brought in by MEDA and other local leaders at various points throughout this timeline here, going as far back to pitch the site in 2007, and then began working in earnest with the locals in 2018 to help support the readiness efforts to make the site attractive for community investment. As you can see, and as I talked about the long-term nature of this site has been marketed by the locals for a number of years and has been zoned industrial since the 1960s. Over the years, though, this site did miss out on a series of high-profile opportunities because the site was not prepared and in a state that was ready for an opportunity of this type until Ford's decision to invest here in 2023. Between 2019 and 2023, as I mentioned, when the MEDC's involvement became more earnest with the local leadership, the MEDC supported the efforts on the major campus through 9 Build Ready Site program grants, including 6 that went to MEDA and 3 to Calhoun County. Also in that time period, MEDA and local leaders held a series of public meetings encouraging public comment about the site planning process and the township's master plan to ensure that there was ample opportunity for local input. As you know, following Ford's announcement and the project in February 2023, the company subsequently announced a resizing of the project and scope of the project in November of that year. At the time, the MEDC worked diligently with the company to develop a fair and revised incentive package that we'll outline and talk about further on the next slide. The MSF board publicly voted on those incentives at a July 2024 meeting in follow-up to those changes. And then we have continued to work with Ford to ultimately sign the Critical Industry Program Grant agreement this year, after which time the land was also transferred officially to Blue Oval Battery, Michigan, for their ownership of the site. As I mentioned, Kristen is now going to talk a little bit more about the amendments and the comparison from the original scope to where we're at now.
Yep. As you can see on the screen here, the 2 yellow boxes there are what was originally approved by the Michigan Strategic Fund Board. I think you might have it in your packet too, in case that's hard to read on the screen there. And then the blue represents what the revised scope looks like. So this restructured incentive package, as we noted, was approved last year by the Michigan Strategic Fund.
Kristen, if I may just say quickly,
Yeah.
I know that one time you guys brought in that book of 44 pages. We don't need books, but you did not bring us a packet this time. I don't know if you guys have them back there.
We don't. I'm apologizing. I sent it to the clerk. We didn't bring them today.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll use the screen as best we
Okay,
can.
sorry about that.
Yeah, thank
we'll
you,
make sure
Kristen.
you get copies of it as a follow-up, though.
Okay, thank you.
So, as we mentioned, we restructured the package here, as noted on the screen, and believe this appropriately and necessarily addresses the project's right sizing while also balancing the investment and growth in Michigan. As you can see, the reduction, there was a significant reduction to the Critical Industry Program Grant. down from an original approval of $210 million to $141 million, with the opportunity to earn up to a maximum of $166 million if it hits certain targets. We also mutually rescinded the Renaissance Zone and instead replaced that with a state essential services exemption, which exempts some taxes on the eligible manufacturing personal property associated with the project. And there is a P198 state education tax abatement also approved at the local level. So we also did make some adjustments to the SSRP grant. We don't have them noted there, but we can follow up in writing with those, to the MEDA grant, because they needed to reflect the changes in the project size. They did shrink their footprint a bit on the site, and we needed to reflect that in the SSRP. As part of this, too, we're also happy to note, I guess let me explain just a second, let me go back for a minute, explain to you the job commitments and the investment commitments. So we reduced that down. As I noted, they can earn $141 million in reimbursements for the creation of at least 1,700 qualified jobs and capital investment of $2.5 billion by March 31st to 2028. So March 31st, 2028 is the due date for those investment job commitments. They have the opportunity to earn more, up to a maximum of $166 million if they create 2,100 jobs and capital investment of $3 billion. So how that's going to work is there is a performance milestone at March 31st, 2028. We'll confirm that they hit their job and investment commitment. If they did that, then we will confirm how many jobs and how much investment beyond that to calculate any earnings above. If they do not hit those jobs and investment commitments, they will be required to repay dollars that they received, and that extra cash grant is no longer available. So they do have to meet those commitments in order to earn and retain the funding that they have. Also want to note that the Blue Oval jobs will have a higher wage starting with these amendments than was originally approved. The starting base wage will be $25 an hour, which it does represent an increase of $5 an hour from what the original approval was. And also want to note that that wage is higher than the regional median wage for Calhoun County, which comes in at $21.52. So altogether, our efforts to amend this project is an example of how we work diligently to make sure that our agreements with companies are fair and responsible to the taxpayer we are all accountable to, and how we use the amendment process if and as needed to ensure that the state gets a fair deal with these opportunities. Do want to also highlight that the SOAR program in statute, both for the CIP and the SSRP, has a very public amendment process. We are required to give you all notice. I think every member of the legislature gets notice of any amendments to these grants, which summarize the nature of the amendment and the rationale for that. So to the extent there's any amendments, you see that information before they are to the MSF board for approval. Go ahead, Josh.
Thanks. Then, and so as Kristen mentioned, the company is continuing to invest and make progress towards 2028 when their investment will conclude and they'll begin operating. But we have already seen an incredible positive impact from this project across the local community and the local economy, with more than 1,000 construction workers on site every day as they continue the build out. And again, with all the different numbers associated with the project that have been made public over the last few years, we wanted to make sure to outline those current figures of where they stand in the jobs and investments of an expected $2.5 billion of private investment for the Marshall community and surrounding region that will create 1,700 new good-paying jobs. We're also proud of the impact that this project has had not only in Marshall itself, but throughout the region, and have certainly learned a lot along the way in terms of how we can promote these opportunities and how we can work across the board with the communities. For example, many projects will often have a range of potential minimum and maximum jobs or investment, like Kristen outlined on the previous slide. In the past, we would often discuss the maximum figure, and though that could understandably create some confusion about the overall requirements, and so we've changed that to discuss the minimum figures and demonstrate the range as we've outlined on this project, as well as discussing the eligible investment, the job creation required to receive public funding, in an effort to provide greater clarity and transparency into these projects, which we understand are highly complex and involve a lot of different layers. We also realize there are always opportunities for additional improvement in how we approach and work towards a culture of continuous improvement, which is one of the cultural values at the MEDC. And we are open to continue to receive that feedback to work to make sure that we are best serving the residents of the state in terms of the way that we are working on these projects and the other work that we're doing at the MEDC. Building off of what I was just talking about in terms of the success that we have seen so far in the community, after this project was announced in 2023, Ford and its local partners worked side by side with the community to address concerns and create partnerships where the community members have a voice in how this investment impacts Marshall and the surrounding area. And the company is committed to a community benefits plan to ensure that they would give back throughout the period of this project. As of today, Ford has invested more than $450,000 in multiple Calhoun County organizations and services, including Marshall Public Schools, the Marshall Bucks Matching Program to support local businesses, the Bohm Theater, Binder Park Zoo, the City of Marshall for tree planting, and repairs to the Brooks Memorial Fountain. Additional community benefits beyond those investments from Ford have also come in partnership with the community, including the project and investments in housing that have jump-started new housing developments in the community. Since the announcement in early 2023, the area has seen over 1,300 new housing units proposed or completed. There was also investment in a conservation easement that's a 218-acre conservation easement running along the north side of the Kalamazoo River, and a 36-acre Bear Creek historical property is being planned by local leaders that could include a trail hub, a park, a welcome center that would provide additional amenities for the community and that would connect to the MDOT pedestrian path over the I-69 interchange with future recreational opportunities at and near the campus. Community stakeholders are also continuing to explore opportunities to create a nature trail along the easement that could be incorporated with the North Country Trail. This green space effort will include planting new trees, creating a green buffer, and other natural areas along and near the major campus. Already 245 acres of the campus have been designated for these conservation areas of protected hiking trails, preserving the local habitats of local wildlife. And the Ford team, as I mentioned, in terms of planting trees, has already planted 1,000 trees in these green spaces at the campus. There's also been significant investment in roads connected with the project and the project impacts, as MDOT received $330 million through a direct state appropriation for road improvements that support the Ford Blue Oval Battery Michigan project and the overall major campus. The Blue Oval Battery project is expected to generate approximately 45% of the new traffic anticipated from these traffic growth estimates, and MDOT is completing additional NEPA or National Environmental Policy Act studies for proposed improvements to M96, otherwise known as Michigan Avenue, I-94, I-69, as well as interchanges at I-69, M96, and 94 and 69 as well, in both Emmett and Marshall Townships, as well as the City of Marshall. Public input has been a part of this process for the road improvements, and they are expected to be largely completed by 2027. Critical improvements have also been made along Michigan Avenue that are expected to be complete by the end of 2025 for both the project and the community going forward. The road improvements also double the existing capacity along Michigan Avenue to accommodate both overall growth of the region and the Ford project itself. I want to thank you, Mr. Chair Kara, Mr. Chair Bruck, and members of the committee for this opportunity to be here today. We welcome any questions at this time, and also, as you can see here, reach out afterwards for any additional follow-up with our colleagues Bree Anderson and Danielle McCann. Thank you again.
Thank you both for your testimony and coming in as always. You know, we reach out to you like we reach out to others, and consistently you guys have been responsive and you have come in to communicate. So I certainly do appreciate that. My first question before I turn it over to committee members for questions as well is, can you just give a high-level overview of what total tools or economic incentives have been utilized, from local tax abatements to money from the state of Michigan, whether the CIP or SSRP, total aggregate incentive tools that have been used for this project.
You want me to go back to
Yeah,
that
why
slide
don't,
too?
if you want to go back to this slide, this shows the bulk of it, right? So if you, again, look at the blue, there's 166, this is to the Blue Oval project specifically, and then we'll go back to the other slide, but a maximum of 166 million cash grant to Ford Blue Oval for this. There is a CESA exemption. Those are the estimated values of those abatements that you see in that 18 million, 18.49 or 18.5 million. And then the estimated value of the abatement for the PA 198 and the state education tax abatement is there at $224 million. If you go back, can we, to this slide, you can see there is $185.3 million for the Strategic Site Readiness Program there. The state also appropriated $299.7 million and $330 million there. We did also note that going back to, probably 2019, there have been what is called a Build Ready Sites program. These were some very early grants to support things like environmental studies, due diligence, option agreements to purchase property, and that totaled just over $4.1 million from 2019 forward.
Thank you. Looks like next question from Chair Brock.
Thank you both for being here, Kristen and Josh. We appreciate your testimony and appreciate what the MEDC does in the state. Obviously, you guys are trying to put dollars in play that bring dollars here to the state and bring economic development, and I think we can all agree we need that here in Michigan. My question kind of delves into a different area. I chair the Homeland Security, Foreign Influence, and you had mentioned that no tax dollars went to the Contemporary Amperex Technologies Limited, or CADL. You're specific in that. My question is, are you aware of the 1260H list? Okay, the federal list that prohibits DOD or federal dollars going to a particular country or companies, and cattle happens to be on that list. And I guess my question kind of delves into, you were specific that no dollars went to cattle, but as far as a provider of the economic incentives, you gave money to Blue Oval, but Blue Oval contracts with a company such as cattle. What is the responsibility or the accountability maybe of the MEDC and those follow-on dollars when you give the economic incentives to avoid bringing in a possible Trojan horse, if you will, into our state, because they have been determined by the federal government to be a security risk to our country as an actor, as a Chinese company with very close Chinese military ties. And so if you can just speak on your responsibility as an organization in those down-traced dollars that are spent because of what you guys are putting in, if you could, please. Thank you.
Yeah,
both.
thank you, Mr. Chair. I can start with this, and then Kristen can touch on a little bit about the requirements of how Ford and their subsidiary Blue Oval Battery Michigan can utilize the funds, as there are specific uses outlined within the agreement. And as you noted, it is important to remember that this is a project that is directly with Blue Oval Battery Michigan, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of Ford Motor Company. This project is not a joint venture. There is a licensing agreement between Ford and CATL. CATL is the leader in this technology. They supply many different companies in the United States and globally, and we see this really as an opportunity to support Ford, support an American company to create these types of jobs here in Michigan, as opposed to allowing China to continue to have the monopoly on this that they would have if we were not otherwise seeing this type of licensing agreement. By doing this agreement, it gives the opportunity for these jobs to be created here by Ford, an American company, and to break up that current strength that the Chinese have in this industry. By bringing these jobs here, it allows us to use our manufacturing ability and have a company like Ford continue to make those investments. And then, Kristen, if you want to hit on the specific impacts of how Ford can use those.
Yeah, so, excuse me, as you can note on this, we have not dispersed $1 yet to Blue Oval Battery on this grant. The grant is very specific on what those grant dollars can be used for. It is typically, there's a definition in the agreement, we're happy to share it with you, defining that it can be used for hard costs. So costs, their licensing fees or anything like that that they're paying as a part of the kettle are not eligible for reimbursement or payment with any state dollars. So we are reimbursing hard costs of the company to construct the facility.
Okay, good.
Oh, I just bring up the analogy of the lottery. You know, lottery money is used for schools, but it simply goes into a fund, and then those funds are used for something else. And I guess as far as the responsibility of MEDC, I think there's possibly a little more accountability that could be done on what those companies you're giving dollars to are using those dollars or not spending on, because you're giving them dollars for these types of things, as you said. You know, the down trace and that responsibility to ensure that we're also looking at our security or looking at the companies that they're utilizing in that process as well. So thank you both.
Yeah, and we appreciate that feedback. Also would just highlight here that these are all going to be Blue Oval Battery Michigan employees or Ford employees. So those are the only two entities that can count for the purposes of the jobs commitment. And then two, the investment commitment will be a full accounting of all the expenditures that they made. So we'll be able to see at that point too whether there's any ineligible expenses there.
Next question from Vice Chair Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so just to lay it out, we have two issues here. We have the issue of the economic development, and then we have foreign influence as well. So I'm going to give it a theory I have. It's called the beer money theory, that when you're a college student, your parents give you money, and then you spend it all on beer. And then your mom is not going to let you starve, so you get then money for food. But really the money went to beer. I know that's kind of a strange thing, and I can dive into that later with anybody who has questions about it. Because here, I guess what I'm seeing is you have an economic development site that went to Ford, but really it's going to cattle indirectly. They're the ones who benefit from it. And I see you shaking your head, so walk me through that then.
Yeah, the only involvement cattle has is through an intellectual property licensing agreement with Ford.
Did you know that Ford had that agreement with cattle before they were given an award?
Yes, I mean, and I believe that was part of the whole public process on this. That was not any secret. The point I think that Josh was making earlier is they are the only ones that can provide this technology. And we need to get that technology here so our American companies can be doing it. Right now, China has an absolute monopoly on that technology.
So would it behoove us then to develop technology of our own instead of building out a place for them to operate their technology that's proprietary?
Yeah, the short answer is yes. Ultimately, we need to continue to invest in this technology, not only the specific LFP technology, but across the future of the automotive industry, electrification of the automotive industry, and a whole host of technologies. We need to ensure that the U.S. is investing and that states are investing in additional research and development activities in our universities, in this type of manufacturing. Those are all things that we can do to ensure that we are making the U.S. more competitive, and we view this project as beginning to do that by them utilizing the CATL technology. It makes these vehicles more competitive here in the U.S. It employs U.S. workers and allows Ford to begin to
But we don't have access to that technology, though. Do you see why we have an issue with it? Because I'm all for economic development, and I can see you gave that timeline that this site was ready for whatever it was. It wasn't necessarily for Ford. It was prepared for anything. But do you see how we have issues with the ties that knowing this company, Cattle, is on our bad dude list, but then still granted it, knowing that it still is indirectly financing them to operate in our state. Do you see why this is coming back up over and over again with us?
Well, yeah, we certainly appreciate, and as the chair mentioned, we're always happy to come here and have these discussions and appreciate the viewpoints of all the members of the committee and the public that have voiced them. Ultimately, by doing this project here in the U.S., it brings this technology to Michigan.
But it
as
doesn't,
opposed
though.
to
Okay, you keep
the
saying
foreign
that over and
influence.
over again, but it doesn't, because we don't have access to that proprietary technology, which I'd rather see you spend the billions of dollars into a Michigan-based company who's going to invest it. But that doesn't matter. My next question is, how do you define critical industry? And then I'll stop.
Yeah, so for critical industry under the program is looking at industries that can have the impact to potentially create significant job creation in the state, that make a future changes in the technology and changes in the overall economy to ensure that Michigan has future manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, and other good-paying jobs in the state.
And who determines that in your organization?
It's ultimately defined within the statute, and then we evaluate the types of industries to look at that include, in this case, an EV project, as well as other industries that could range from semiconductors, advanced manufacturing, and opportunities that we evaluate based on the statute that was put in place by the legislature.
Okay.
Yeah, and one of the last hearings we were here, we did walk through the MEDC strategic plan, and you can see within that some of the particular focus industries that we see as most poised for growth and opportunity for growth in Michigan, and also to, I would say, one, diversify, and two, expand supply chain for some of our existing industries. So that is part of our strategic plan. We can always share that again with you.
All right, next question from Minority Vice Chair Wagella.
Thanks for being here again. First, I'll start. Rare time where I think I defend the MEDC, but wanted to just clarify something. The funds for this project were approved by the legislature through a bill in 2023. It wasn't necessarily the MEDC just deciding this. I believe we all had a chance to vote on that, and I know I voted no. Is that correct?
That's correct. This is all appropriated money that went through
Yeah,
that
and
process.
it wasn't approved through like the 1.5. It was a standalone bill. I just think it's important for us to remember that because we make these decisions in the chamber. Now, my question is, this project started, I think, at 3,000 jobs and went down to 1,700. Is that correct? Or is it 2,800?
Yes, that's correct. It was resized down to, we'll pull this up here just in terms of the way that it changed based on the original approval and how that led to the potential new job creation of 1,700 as the minimum.
And looking at this, I'm not as concerned about the national security risks with Ford being the one running, but I think what we learned from community members from Goshen and Marshall is it wasn't just about the CCP. It was about these mega sites being formed, them not wanting these huge industrial plants in their communities, et cetera. So I think it's just important as we talk about this. There are other reasons people push back, and my biggest thing is I don't think this is a good use of taxpayer money to give private corporations public money. Now, you mentioned earlier, and Chair, thanks for the leeway here, that there was an estimated that this would give, for every $1 spent, did you say it was $1.21 would be returned?
That's correct.
How did you come to that number?
Yeah, thank you. And
was that number reduced? Was that number created after the jobs were reduced or before?
Yeah, so a couple things there. First, one clarification, it was 2,500 jobs originally, then went down to 1,700, just to make sure to have that number there. The calculation in terms of the economic impact is based off of a REMI analysis. That was both completed initially at the time of the original plan as well as the amended plan. And that's why when the jobs and the scope of the project changed, we made sure to appropriately revise the revised the incentive package as well so that there was still that positive overall economic impact, which is done through, again, what's called a REMI analysis, Regional Economic Modeling Incorporated, which is a model that we've used for many years and many economic development organizations as well as other organizations have used for economic output studies.
And just for clarification, so the $1.21 return is based off of the revised numbers, not the original numbers.
That's correct.
And then there was another number you threw at us for new income taxes. Was that 121 million or billion? It was just really quick, and I didn't catch what was said.
Yes, let me just get to my notes there. 24.9 billion. over 20 years.
24.9 billion over 20 years. And now is that number calculated by reducing the amount of, like, for example, I think we saw $224 million in state education tax abatements every year. Is that subtracted from that? I just think, like, really what I've been asking for I guess weeks now is to have a thorough breakdown publicly of the REMI model, because it's easy to say, yeah, it's going to bring this money back, but we aren't being told exactly how that number is being calculated, right? What are the factors involved? And then how is there a decision made above, what's the threshold for this is a good project, this is a bad project, and where's the leeway for the MEDC to decide that? I think it's unclear, at least to me, and I'm sure some other members on the committee, how we're determining what are good jobs and what are not, or good deals and not good deals. I would love to have that at some point.
Yeah, and I can, answer that now in terms of what we have for this is that, again, the REMI is calculated based on taking into account all those costs that are going out. So for the first part of your question of does it take into account all the different incentives, the answer is yes. It's not just picking a specific component of it. What also makes the REMI plan different than some other analyses that are out there, such as an in-plan analysis or others, is that it isn't just a static input-output measure, but that it also looks at things like specific state and county, regional wages, labor markets, supply chain dynamics to look at both the impact of the individual project and what the impact would have as a result of the project and how it evolves over time. And I think it's important also to note that that's a consistent analysis that we have done at the MEDC for many years and is something that overall has been used by local, state, and federal agencies for over 40 years in terms of that type of analysis.
And if I may, and then I'll share one real quick, maybe more just a statement, because I think, like, really trying to get people to understand this. When we are looking at using state dollars, which are education or elsewhere, and we're making models based off of that, how far those dollars go change and where those dollars are put. For example, public transportation has a return on investment, so does education. So I don't know how we can potentially even come up with accurate estimates on the return without factoring in, if we put this money elsewhere, we would see a great return as well. Maybe a more left view of, like, the chair's broken window fallacy in a way that he talked about weeks ago. But my point is, these are, I think, impossible calculations to really be made accurately, and that's a frustration that I have.
Yeah, I would, Vice Chair, say we're happy to have a detailed conversation on what that process looks like at your convenience. And then two, I would say based on the statute, it is one of several considerations. You're asking how do we decide, right? The REMI or the ROI modeling is one of a litany of considerations spelled out in statute for how to decide where to recommend to place these dollars at the MSF board. So if the statute identifies this as one of several.
All right. Well, maybe we need to have these REMI economists come in and have a thorough debate sometime. I'd like to challenge them on some economic theory. But we'll turn it over to Representative Bierlein for the next question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and the distinguished Vice Chair took a lot of my questions with his REMI report there. I would like to go back to cattle and the licensing agreement. How much can you share with it? Do you know what that licensing agreement looks like? Is it by the piece? Is it buying the IP up front and then having full access to it? What does that look like?
I think that's a question better answered by Ford on the actual specifics. I don't want to speak to the mechanics of that agreement. I just know it's a license for the technology, so I don't believe that transfers any ownership rights over, but allows them to license the actual technology on a limited term basis.
And in MEDC's experience, are licensing agreements common in manufacturing?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Next question. question from Representative Pohutsky.
Thank you. Rep Beerline got one of my questions, but the other one that I had is there's been a lot of conversation about community support. How does the MEDC ascertain community support for a project?
Yeah, I can, thank you for the question. I can start off with that. We work, and again, this is an area I would say, first of all, that we have continuously worked to improve how we look at community support and the groups that we discuss these opportunities with and work with. And as we're looking at a site development of this type, we begin by working with the local economic development organization and the local elected leaders, while also working, as was done between 2019 and 2023, by the community that can bring in the MEDC as well to hear concerns from citizens and others. So it's working with that mix of local economic development groups, the local elected leaders, as well as residents of the community. And what we have seen is that there is growing support overall for this project, including over 100 Marshall area business leaders, school leaders, and elected officials that have publicly signed on in terms of letters of support for this project. And so that shows a robust and growing level of local support for the project.
And is the project, there was a little bit of confusion last week, or at least lack of clarity. Can you just clarify, is the project still underway, and roughly what stage is it, if so?
Yes, it is still underway. They are still, as you can see, that picture was a more recent than perhaps the last time we were in front of you on what the current construction status is. They're hoping to wrap that construction up, I believe, in 2026, and we'll start hiring and having people on site doing work 2026 with an end date where we have to confirm their job and investment of March of 2028. So absolutely still moving forward. Yeah.
Next question from Representative Meerman.
Thank you, Chair. Just to lay out a couple things to the committee and then a question to you. Thank you for being here. I do appreciate your willingness to be here. Our Senator Aliska Slotkin, her first bill, it's very pointed, I think, and it means a lot because it's her first bill, but you know, she talks about keeping technology out of the United States that could be used to harm us here. And she goes into quite a lot of detail about that. And she points to Biden administration, Department of Commerce-led investigation into the national security risk of connected vehicles from countries of concern, including China. This resulted in a rule banning the import or sale of Chinese Russian connected vehicles, as well as connected vehicle hardware or software. So I understand we're talking about a battery. I understand we're talking about licensing of technology of that battery. To me, there's so many things pointing to not the Chinese people, but the Chinese Communist Party looking to subvert this nation in any way possible. And this is coming from bipartisan fronts, that this is happening in real time. I think it should be a huge concern for all of us that cattle is involved in any way. Do these things at a national level play into the, I guess, the thought process of MEDC?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. And yes, that does play in. And ultimately, by utilizing this technology here, frankly, the alternative would be to do what many other companies have done, which is to import this from China. And this, by licensing the technology, ultimately allows us to reduce the dependency from China and reduce the dependency overall from foreign manufacturing, and ultimately build our long-term manufacturing and technology capacity here in the U.S. while employing 1,700 Ford employees in the United States. More importantly here, just as importantly here for the MEDC, to see that happen in Michigan. So it's both a combination of onshoring and bringing that technology here where our role is to help make sure that we are seeing a disruption of this current Chinese monopoly that, frankly, nobody wants to see, and that we need to see both the technology and the manufacturing take place here, and this is a way to begin to make that happen.
Follow-up, Chair. I realize that the Chinese have not quite a monopoly on batteries, but a great deal. But, you know, there's Japanese and South Korean batteries as well. My point really is there are other, I think, ways to get this technology, maybe not quite at the top. Another thing that Senator Slotkin says here, that, you know, these Chinese vehicles are dirt cheap thanks to state subsidies. So was it, and did you look at all into what other battery manufacturers outside of a country of concern could possibly, and I realize this is the Ford situation, but I do think we at the state level should care whether or not Ford has another option besides a country of concern.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, I think that is a better question for Ford in terms of the partnership. But what our understanding is the specifics of this LFP technology. CATL is a leader in this technology, and for the specific that they were looking at here, and the alternative would be to utilize the sourcing direct from the foreign manufacturing from China. And by having this take place here, Ford is able to gain more control in this and able to bring these jobs here to the U.S.
Next question from Representative Conlon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your testimony today. I have a question. Does the MEDC have anybody who looks at social impact? I am a big proponent of community development financial institutions, proud mother of a daughter who did social impact research for WACIF, the Washington, D.C. Community Development Investment Fund. To Rep. Wagela's point, when you're looking at, like, what is that investment return on that community, I wonder if you'll be looking at that forward, because that does help to measure in ways that are not dollars, but really actually affect the health of a community based around a project.
Yeah, I can start with that. Thank you for the question, and then if Kristen has anything to add as well. Yes, we do have members of our team. We have a strong community development team that is working on those overall impacts that we see from these types of projects, as well as other opportunities that we're looking at. And then we also have really built our small business team and the way that we supported small businesses over the last 4 to 5 years as well. A recognition that those small businesses we all saw, have seen over the years, really are what make up the fabric of communities, and how these types of projects can play a role in it, but they are not all that we do. And so as we look at that type of overall impact of projects, we look at, as a part of our strategic plan and the work that we do every day, a focus on both people, places, and projects. And this project falls into that projects category of bringing these types of large business attraction and growth opportunities to the state. But these businesses want to be in communities that have that strong downtown, that have small businesses. That's where the place aspect, along with housing, comes in. And then the people aspect is making sure that we are supporting both ourselves as well as with our partners, the talented workforce here in the state today, as well as attracting additional workforce to the state as well. And so to be successful, we need to continue to invest in all three aspects of that as they support and build off each other.
Next question from Representative Shriver.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The one big beautiful bill cutting a lot of these EV tax credits, charger credits, battery manufacturing credits, and in addition to that, having new EV fees. There was a Princeton study that estimated that repealing tax credits and emission rules could cut 2030 EV sales by 40%. And so it just begs the question, what are we doing here?
Well, what we have seen so far is that the company has continued to invest in the site. There's, as we mentioned, over 1,000 construction workers at the site today. That's what we are focused on today, is a continued build out of American jobs, American manufacturing, and the overall future of the automotive industry, understanding that both market conditions and federal and other policy will have an impact on the type of product that will continue to be produced by these companies, but ultimately seeing Ford commit to investing billions of dollars and commit to investing and creating 1,700 jobs is what we are focused on today at this site.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, we track closely what's happening at the federal industrial policy level, right? And 2.5 years ago, when this project was approved, it was a very different market, right? And the world has shifted pretty dramatically over the last 6 months in particular, and so we are watching that very closely. I think at the end of the day, we've got a really great site that's developed here. We think Ford is still all in, moving forward with their project here. That is what we are seeing and tracking.
Of the 1,700 jobs, how many of them do you estimate will go to foreign labor?
All the jobs will have to be jobs that are reporting to Ford or Blue Oval Battery, Michigan. So I can't tell you if they have any foreign nationals working in there, but they will be employees legally authorized to work in the United States and reporting to Ford, Blue Oval, Michigan.
Thank you.
You mentioned earlier that we're using cattle technology at the Blue Oval plant. And given that Governor Youngkin had said that this was a Trojan horse with its ties to the Chinese Communist Party, and Governor Whitmer largely dismissed that, but yet then fast forward and President Biden put cattle on the blacklist for doing work with our military. Was a CFIUS review done, or what steps were taken to ensure that we are not compromising our nation to the Chinese Communist Party?
As to a CFIUS, I'll have to get back to you on that. That's not a process we run in our shop, right? But we can go back and get you reports on what we did on all the due diligence for this project. But cattle or CATL is operating in the United States right now, and in fact, I think Tesla is their biggest client of technology, so they are here operating, but we are trying to disrupt that and get that technology into the hands of American companies.
Is Blue Oval committed to not working with cattle?
That's a question for Ford.
Thank you. I don't see any further questions, and we'll move on to Mr. Joe Sella. Thank you both for coming in, as always. And next up is the former ambassador to Fiji, Mr. Joe Sella. Looking forward to your testimony today on the Marshall Megasite.
Good morning, Chairman Kara, Chairman Bruck, Vice Chairs, committee members. It's an honor to be before you again today. I come to you as a former United States ambassador, 5 South Pacific Island nations, well aware of the adversarial engagements of China and its government, known as the Chinese Communist Party. Along with that, the subnational incursions, influence operations, and other threats that they present throughout the world and to the United States, and I would also suggest to you to our state of Michigan. I serve as co-founder and director of the Michigan-China Economic and Security Review Group. We're on mission to monitor, assess, and report on the threats, potential threats, or emerging threats from China, the CCP, its entities, affiliates, or their associates, including China-based companies, through subnational incursions and presence in other forms, and assist in mitigating or reducing those threats in the state of Michigan. This work is done on a bipartisan basis, educating local and state elected officials, federal elected officials, helping in the protection of our state and national security, ensuring that Article 1 of the Michigan Constitution and the charge of the preamble to the Constitution of the United States are upheld and fortified for the security and protection of our citizens and to provide for the common defense. My remarks will be brief so that I can answer as many of your questions as possible. The best way to sum up the corrupted, hushed, and rushed deal that was concocted and championed by Governor Whitmer, the MEDC Ford Motor with China-based and Chinese Communist Party tied Contemporary Amperex Technology Limited, CATL, is ready, fire, aim. This is a grand, high-tech and manufacturing, high-risk experiment saddled on the back of Michigan taxpayers. Your good offices are asking very important questions that were never asked by the principals to this deal that ruptured the consent of the governed. When considering the judgments and decisions, the speed and the shrouding of the deal, particularly with binding and punitive 5- and 10-year non-disclosure agreements, $175 million no-bid contract, and a secret code name, they've shattered open government, wasted taxpayer dollars, and jeopardized our national security. I would submit to you that it is a debacle. I will preface my remarks by stating that China is on the hunt, and our footing nationally and the states is not commensurate with this threat. It manifested itself in unrestricted warfare, political warfare, lawfare, espionage, intellectual property theft, and other malign activity. The threat from China has manifested itself in Michigan now for the third time in 8 months, involving unvetted Chinese nationals at the University of Michigan, whether students or scholars, ranging from spying on our troops at Camp Grayling during a military exercise, posing as a United States citizen and voting in the 2024 election, to transporting hazardous biological agents or material through DTW. There is more afoot too, and our eyes must be wide open. In February of 22, U.S. intelligence agencies convened a bipartisan group of state and local elected officials, warning them of the national security threat such deals with PR's China-based and CCP-based and tied companies present. It remains unclear if Michigan officials, elected or otherwise, or companies attended this meeting. 5 months later, our intelligence agencies and national security agencies declassified a memo involving this meeting, memorializing it, offering directives to these elected and appointed government officials, business leaders to, quote, exercise vigilance, conduct due diligence, and ensure transparency, integrity, and accountability are built into the partnership to guard against potential foreign government exploitation. These government and business elites leading this cattle deal, and I will add, cattle is deeply tied to the Chinese Communist Party, and I'm happy to talk more about that in greater detail. They defied this direction found in this declassified memo, averted their eyes, and performed zero strict scrutiny and no due diligence. Some key events to consider. Number one, in 2023, while Ford was pushing for the money from the MEDC, one of their lobbyists worriedly asked a member of the State House, "What are you hearing about the China connection?" 2, in early December of 2023, a cattle battery farm located on Camp Lejeune, a secure military installation in North Carolina and our largest Marine Corps base, was disconnected because of the national security threat it presented. 3, in January of 2024, a Reuters report revealed the House China Committee is exploring connections between Ford and cattle, the PLA, North Korea, and forced labor in Xinjiang, PLA meaning the People's Liberation Army. These potential connections were exposed after the committee finally got access to the actual Ford cattle agreement documents. 4, on February 19th of 2024, a news report revealed how cattle is restructuring the shareholdings of its top 2 executives to avoid the designation of being a FEOC. It's an acronym, FEOC, meaning a foreign entity of concern. And I can delve into that more later too, if you wish. Number 5, in December of 2024, the Pentagon, working closely with Congress, added a provision in the National Defense Authorization Act prohibiting the Department of Defense from procuring cattle batteries on account of the national security threat they present, and the Department of Homeland Security followed suit thereafter. 6, in January of this year, the Biden administration's Department of Defense designated cattle a Chinese military company. No party to the deal with cattle or those signing the NDAs were provided information about cattle's deep ties to the CCP, PLA, North Korea, Xinjiang, nor did they ask. Nor did they blink with the fiat cloud hanging over cattle's head, nor when Camp Lejeune, DOD, and DHS took the steps they did. I'd like to close on a couple of points. Ford has long talked, and the MEDC certainly talked about hiring local residents for Ford, suggesting about 1,700 people could be employed to help with their public relations push, and how cattle will only have advisors at the plant temporarily and will return home. The thing is, if you go online and do a search right now, you will find that China-based and Chinese Communist Party tied cattle is hiring employees for the proposed plant in Marshall. In fact, they are hiring Ford employees away, and some have gone to China for training. This is done through a subsidiary, US-based subsidiary of cattle known as CATK. And I can delve into that more later. In 2023, when the cattle and Goshen deals were exposed and under fire, Mr. Quentin Messer, the CEO of MEDC, and Mr. Hunt gave their assurances to the press and in public hearings of the integrity of the Goshen project, quote, that due diligence and, quote, exhaustive due diligence has been conducted and based on the judgments of Goshen's, quote, business credibility has been conducted and based on the judgments of, an account of, quote unquote, board meetings and approvals while casually expressing we feel good about this company. In fact, none of this was true. Mr. Hunt and Messer, all parties involved, failed to ask these basic questions and take the most basic steps to protect the national security of our state and nation on the Goshen deal and the cattle deal. Soon after they, in committee, they publicly expressed confidence, then pivoted hard and acknowledged that an insufficient amount of due diligence was done and essentially said, sorry, but we'll get it done right next time. It is very important to remember that Articles 7 and 9 through 14 of China's national intelligence law require Chinese nationals of Chinese-based companies, whether in mainland China or anywhere around the globe, including in Michigan, to surveil, collect, and report as directed. In other words, conduct espionage, sometimes for remuneration, whatever form that may take. Should the cattle deal ever come to fruition in Michigan, it will only be a matter of time before espionage activity commences. I submit to you. Battle Creek Air National Guard Base and Fort Custer are no more than 12 miles away, where mission-critical assets are believed to be housed. I'm deeply grateful for your leadership, all of you, in shedding light on this deal, and as we work to get our footing in Michigan commensurate with the tangible threat that China and the Chinese Communist Party present to Michigan. I'm grateful for your time and attention, and appreciate this opportunity, and happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for your testimony, Ambassador Sella. My first question I have for you is, who is Cattle's founder and top executive, and does he have any ties to the Chinese Communist Party?
Yes, it is Robin Zhang, and in fact, it was because of him and another key shareholder within Cattle that they restructured it. It would clear the fiat hurdles that would, as it was previously structured, prohibit them from receiving tax credits through legislation. So, not sure if that went through on their end, but deeply tied to the Chinese Communist Party. They had, within Cattle's flagship headquarters, have 28 distinct Chinese Communist Party branches. And those that are members take an oath of fealty to the party, and they are expected to do certain things and advance the interests of the Chinese Communist Party at all costs. Sorry, I don't have my microphone on.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sella, for being here today. Appreciate it. Appreciate your insight and knowledge in this area. And thank you for your service to our country as an ambassador as well. Cattle obviously is on my mind and a lot of folks' minds. We know that Governor Youngkin would not even allow cattle to put a facility in his state. The MEDC had mentioned that cattle has other production facilities in the U.S. Do you know where?
I don't know where.
Okay.
If I were to guess, I would say they are entangled with Ford in Tennessee and Kentucky, where they have two other battery plants being assembled. And again, I think that might explain that contemporary Amperex technology Kentucky that is driving the hiring for Ford employees or cattle employees to the Blue Oval plant in Marshall.
That's a CATK that you mentioned.
CATK, correct, that's it.
Okay, roger that. And we know cattle is the largest producer of batteries in the world, and I think the top three are Chinese companies, but there's also LG, there's also Samsung, Panasonic. My question to you maybe is, why would cattle come to the U.S. to help us?
Yeah, very important question. Some biographical features about cattle, and you wonder in terms not only the national security threat, but the threat to Michigan taxpayers. They have a market capitalization of $158 billion. So they could have engaged with Ford, and Ford would not have need to tap Michigan taxpayers as they did, I submit to you. They just did an IPO at the Hong Kong Exchange and raised another $4.6 billion. Unfortunately supported by some U.S. banking concerns. Chinese Communist Party, by their nature, are very opportunistic. They are looking for toeholds. There is a policy that is a part of the Chinese Communist Party that is known as military-civil fusion. So that means that at any cost, all elements of China, there really is no private sector, is on mission to share this technology to ensure that the People's Liberation Army is working towards getting it to be the premier fighting force and military power in the world. So they are on mission to that, and they will do anything that it takes. In fact, former President Biden's Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, did an interview with CBS's Margaret Brennan, I believe it was in February of 22, where he says, when it comes to China, there is no difference between the Chinese Communist Party, government, and the private sector. So they're one and the same. It's kind of a meld. And so they're looking for these opportunities. And again, this is not a partisan thing. They're looking for, there are Republicans in other states who have gone all in on these things and then have walked them back. North Dakota is one involving the Fufang plant. It's just it's great to see bipartisan support from some of the good work that you're doing. I think the time has come. You're doing an invaluable effort to educate and inform people. So I think our footing is just catching up with the threat. And it is a reasonable thing to do. I would say during the first Cold War against the Soviets, our footing was much more, attuned to the threat. And I would posit again that we are not now, and what you're doing is getting us there, and I really appreciate it.
We're certainly trying to highlight and make awareness, bring awareness to this issue. We know that the Select Committee on CCP has brought up Michigan in their committee, talking about cattle, and it's on the national, field of view that we are doing something wrong here in Michigan. And I, just to add one more item, I met with General Rogers here in the state this week, and he mentioned that we have the 4 major missile systems we have. They down-traced every manufacturer within those missile systems, and there are 1,500 Chinese companies involved in the production of our 4 major missile systems for our national defense and offense. And so this is a pertinent issue. It's a cutting-edge issue, and I think it's a very, very timely to talk about it.
Correct, and I'd like to give you some additional information on that to a resource who is doing research into American companies, but also academia, where Chinese companies and universities are being funded by our federal tax dollars to fuel research for PLA-tied entities. It is gravity-defying state of affairs, and I'll follow up with you separately if I might on that.
All right, we have several questions left in about 12, 15 minutes, so if you can all work to try to ask your question quickly, it would be much appreciated. We will turn it over to Representative Pahutsky.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you had said that you are assuming that cattle is also partnering with Ford in Tennessee and Kentucky.
I said I didn't know if they are. They may be.
But you listed those.
They may be.
They're not. They're
That's-
partnering with
yeah.
SK Industries.
Yeah,
So
they may be, but and I think that's the way to go. And in past public statements,
That's fine. I'm trying to be
in
quick, though.
past
So-
public statements, I've encouraged more of that allied partnership. That's an exemplary instance. Governor Whitmer's engagement with Taiwan is important, that sort of thing. But engaging with
that's great.
the
Please stop
PRC
trying to run
is
out the
not.
clock on me, though. I've got some other questions. I'm just saying, like, we shouldn't make
I-
assumptions or list specific sites if we
I
are
made no conclusion. I
woefully
appreciate the clarification. Thank you.
underprepared. In terms of like, I'm sorry, can you repeat at the beginning, you did introduce yourself with who you are working with now. Can you repeat that? Because I didn't catch it, I'm sorry.
That I'm working with.
For whatever.
So I serve for the volunteer entity, the Michigan-China Economic and Security Review Group.
Okay, and are you being, are you employed or a contractor for anyone in
No.
Marshall opposing this?
No, ma'am. No,
Great, thank
never.
you.
No way.
Do you have any experience with defense or the State Department? I know you were an ambassador, but
Understand.
anything with national security experience, anything
Yeah.
like that?
So you are fully briefed without getting into too many details about by the national security and intelligence agencies about the nature of what is afoot with adversaries before you go to post. And then when you are at post, it is you are read in and follow and track actively the same. So yes, I am.
For all adversaries or anything like that? I just, can
Correct.
you, because your experience leading up to that really didn't have anything to do
Correct.
with
So
defense.
so with
national
our
security.
allies and partners, Five Eyes partners, meaning Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and England, worked very collaboratively, tracking the China threat that was there, and putting to good use after I returned from post, have written, delivered talks, done media interviews about the threat that China continues to present to the Indo-Pacific, but also opportunity here in our great home state came with the China threat and began engaging on it because nobody was, and it needed to happen.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Next question from Representative Meerman. Next question from Vice Chair Green.
Thank you. How can I say, because I'm going with Representative Polhusky. Okay, so just to further, when you were the ambassador, you learned a lot of what's going on in the South Pacific, correct? And you also had the CIA, I would imagine, was stationed with you, and you were briefed by them regularly, correct?
I can't talk about
Okay, but I'm just, okay.
either way,
I'll
I
talk
can't
to
talk
you
about it.
afterwards, because friendly, not foe. So in Made in China 2025 was a manifesto that China put out a number of years ago. And their aim was to dominate key sectors worldwide, including technology, intellectual property, and it was not just a crest for economic growth, but it is a deliberate strategy to shape the global balance of power. So, because I have written extensively on this with my intelligence background, and I guess I thank you for your service here, because we have had 3 acts of terrorism through U of M in Michigan, and we also had we subverted an attack on the Detroit Arsenal. And so I guess I don't really have a question. I just thank you for bringing this up, because I think we as Americans live in this beautiful comfort and country, and we neglect to realize the threats that are around us, and they can sneak in so easily, and that's why I am so concerned, because I don't really believe Ford is being nefarious in this, but I do believe cattle is, and they snuck in, and to our ignorance, I would say, we have financed cattle coming into Michigan. So
Yeah, if I may just respond to your observations, thank you for your kind words. Would say that there was a great speech that I commend to all of you, delivered by now retired Admiral Mike Studeman in February of 23, saying how the China threat is more gigantic than can be understood or appreciated. And he talks about a China blindness. I mean, that's not a hostile statement, but it's, again, what I talked about earlier in terms of the whole of society, whole of government catching up with their footing commensurate with the threat. So Ford has a noble track record in our state, led the charge of the arsenal of democracy in World War II. But General Jack Keane just the other day on Fox News spoke to the nature of what China is doing here has been unlike any adversary has ever put upon us in our 250 years of existence, and very complex, and we really don't know the scintilla of the totality. So, and I will say that Xi Jinping, when he came to power, he recognized the foundation of the Chinese Communist Party as weak within the corporate infrastructures throughout China. And in 2021, and he mandated corporate articles of association adjust accordingly to be more tough and advance the party's goals. And in 2021, Cattle amended their articles to emphasize the importance of, quote, the construction of party organizations. So expanding them and engaging in more activity, again, all towards that unipolar dominance that China seeks, militarily, academically, and technology.
Next question from Representative Shriver.
Thank you, Chair. When I think about adversaries, obviously you've got to throw China in that mix. When I think about who is impacting Michigan workers as well as workers across the United States, you know, the list is very extensive in terms of, you've got 31 million foreign-born laborers across America. 23% from Mexico, 6% from India, 5% from China, 4% from the Philippines. The list goes on from numerous areas. And that's something that I'd like to get your thoughts on in terms of at what point would you be able to say, well, there's an adversarial edge to foreign labor coming into America as a whole at the behest of American workers who are more than qualified for these jobs?
I would say that you turn to history in the immediate advent of the Cold War, and I think you turn to a more contemporaneous moment. 1947, the National Security Act was passed, and it girded us on, though imperfect, it girded us on our foot to fight, lead, and win the Cold War against the Soviet Union. I think that the memo that I referred to, that our intelligence agencies and national security agencies put together, declassified a few months later, following that meeting with a bipartisan group of elected officials and business leaders, giving them the roadmap of the to-dos and the to-don'ts because of that threat, because of the nature of the threat from China, principally. Out of those other countries you mentioned, China is the only one that has the national intelligence law and a national security law where Chinese nationals are required to surveil, collect, and report, and sometimes be remunerated for those actions. So it is a real thing. Again, back to Admiral Studemann's words, more gigantic than can be understood or appreciated. So I think it really is a moment perhaps for a new version of a national security act on the federal level to be introduced commensurate with these threats. And these topics could be engaged and addressed, whether it's a vetting of nationals that come in from China. I know there are existing firewalls within universities that Chinese nationals are not allowed to cross over, particularly if it involves defense research. But that can be made more muscular. I think it needs to be more muscular based on what we've seen out of U of M the last 8 months. So no shortage of opportunities. And again, I think speaking to the importance of your work, until something like that is adjusted and teeth put into it on the federal level, your work here is important, and I hope you keep it up.
So would you concede that whether you're having someone working in America from an adversarial nation like China or a quote-unquote non-adversarial nation like India, either way, the victim is the Michigan worker. Wouldn't you agree?
Correct. Workers could be exploited, industry could be exploited. Again, the big white elephant in the room is China. They have former FBI Director Christopher Wray did a study that talked about intellectual property theft. And I think the number on an annual basis that ultimately hurts the workers, but our company, thieved by China, the Chinese Communist Party, is anywhere from $400 to $600 billion a year, and that's the greatest transfer of wealth in our nation's history.
Would you support measures to cut off the amount, or I should say eliminate the amount of Chinese workers, Chinese-born workers in America?
I think this is a thing that ought to be studied, and I think your good work here will, I think you have more opportunities to look into solar, to look into academia, and perhaps come up with your own vetting on the state level. You have the purse over academia, and you could do a lot in that respect. So I think what has to be happened is just a very realistic look at the threat, an adjustment of the footing so it's commensurate to it, and it can involve a de-risking, which would involve a vetting of workers or whatever structure. I would leave that to the intelligence agencies and the military to ascertain with input on both sides of the aisle. But I also think a decoupling as well, because again, as I was mentioning to Rep. Bruck, where there are instances of that really nefarious commingling of our tax dollars to China-based companies and academia, that sort of thing, particularly when it involves critical minerals, critical technology, space, military, anything, that should just be fractured.
And my only follow-up to kind of to shift subjects, we're talking about foreign nationals coming to America to take American jobs. The other side of the coin is obviously American jobs going overseas. We have an estimated across America 800,000, perhaps 1.4 million jobs, American jobs, that are in China right now. And how much of a national security risk is having 1.4 million jobs, American jobs, in an adversarial nation? And we're talking Apple, Tesla, Intel, Ford, General Motors, Starbucks. So from coffee to your car, to your phone, to your shoes, to your vaccines, you name it, it's an American job, but it's in China.
Correct.
And so how much of a factor is that in all of this conversation?
Well, it's a factor, and I think I'll just cite two instances on how it's manifested. One, Senator Gary Peters has worked on a bill to onshore pharmaceuticals, bipartisan thing. President Trump is continuing to talk about it. That's kind of a layup thing. Again, that de-risking. In a way, you could say it's a quasi-decoupling. So that is, I think, one particular instance where that can happen. I have a friend who works for a Fortune 500 company here in Metro Detroit, has traveled to China for decades, and in recent years, they began to slowly get themselves on a footing to de-risk. In other words, pulling up tent stakes out of China because of that very thing that you highlighted, and they're looking elsewhere, India and the Pacific Rim, because of personal threats to their employees' safety, but also intellectual property theft.
I completely disagree with moving American jobs from country to country to country. They need to come back to America. I have to concede to my other members who have questions. So
I'm all for onshoring and insourcing, so
Yeah.
I'm in solidarity with you.
very good.
Yes, sir.
Quick question for me is, back to the whole situation with Governor Whitmer said that Governor Youngkin's decision not to have them come to North Carolina was a political determination. Do you believe that this was more of a political determination by Governor Youngkin or potentially more of a political determination by Governor Whitmer?
It's a fair point. Governor Whitmer gave a couple of different statements on this, and about Governor Youngkin of Virginia's decision. And I will tell you that I don't think it was particularly fair or accurate what she said. I think had this entire thing been dealt with patiently and prudently, had been given a CFIUS treatment, had just asked these questions that now you're asking, I don't know if this deal would have ever gone through. She kind of sloughed off and brushed off Governor Youngkin with that political determination call. But as you all know, on both sides of the aisle, good policy determinations can also mean good political determinations for both sides of the aisle. And I would posit that the fact that you have bipartisan support of your legislative package to counter China is indicative of good policy and good politics. And you see that happening broadly now, from EVs to whatever. So I think if you could dig into it more, I would recommend chairs, vice chairs, majority, minority, engage with Governor Youngkin's office and see what he said. I think it wouldn't take much of a leap to say when it's a Trojan horse is indicative that he probably had some insights in terms of perhaps some operatives that are part of cattle, their management team has proposed, that were red flags, that presented a national security threat. And I commend you to perhaps dig into that and see if those same people are part of Fort Blue Oval Marshall.
And it seems that Joe Biden vindicated his perspective with taking them off of or blacklisting them for the use of our military.
Correct.
So
January 5th of this year.
Yes. Next question from Representative Bierlein.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ambassador, for being here. I guess, full disclosure, I don't watch a lot of national media. We've got enough stuff going on here at the state level that I probably couldn't tell you what's going on in the federal government. I think there was a House budget recently passed.
I think so.
Do you see that will affect business like what Ford is going after here? Do those subsidies that are probably would be eliminated under the House budget, is that going to have an effect on production?
I think it could. I mean, I think you look at, I think it was raised earlier, Chairman Bill Ford's remarks at Mackinac, I think last weekend, where he sees, I think, an existential threat to this project, saying if those provisions are out, I believe, don't quote me on this, I think 45X and 30D, it would imperil the Blue Oval Marshall plant. So I think that just points to, I think, a frail deal from the get-go that really wasn't commensurate. I mean, I think these things that I think were spoke about that we just came upon them in the last 6 months or the 2 years, they've been known, Representative, by industry, by military, by intel for decades. And that is not a fair assessment made earlier, I would submit to you.
Mr. Chair, if I can just real quick. So maybe this project with cattle, I think we're all discussing some issues with it. If the opportunity were to present itself to move forward with a different partner or with different technology, do you think that would still be a viable option? Or it's not even, I don't know if that's the right question. Is there a better way to do this?
Well, to Representative Pohetsky's earlier point, SK Industries' engagement with Ford is an example of how it should be done. Our engagement with Taiwan that Governor Whitmer has done is how it should be done, not an adversary like China. Read Goshen, read cattle, highly perilous. And I think, I'm not going to speak to the economics of these deals and the return on the investment. I think those are kind of shaky and questionable. Whatever company or whatever sector of manufacturing you're talking about, but I would really say that there should be you could lead the way on this in Michigan with a rich manufacturing history where you give priority to preferred partners meaning the Five Eyes, UK, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Canada. There's a great brain trust out there. Representative Bruck spoke to that earlier, LG, Panasonic, among others. So I think if that's properly done, mindful of the proper use of tax dollars, I think that that would be, I think, an important way forward. And out of this, perhaps checks on future considerations and future administrations, and stepping away from this example, which I think is the way not to do business. I think you're in a position to set the standard of how to do business, particularly when it comes to China and companies based there.
Good. Last question. Turn it over to Chair Bruck.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you again. You know, we don't have to convince Taiwan and those in the Pacific Theater to be scared of China. They're all deathly afraid of what is going to happen, what could happen, and they have a lot of processes in place to avoid that espionage and intrusion into their own country. So as far as a do-out, placing guardrails, ensuring that something like this doesn't happen again. Obviously, I have my own opinions, but I won't state those. But as far as a do-out on legislation, we're providing oversight. All of our members are. But I always like to ask the question: if you had a list of the top 1, 2, 3 things that you would like to see legislatively that would avoid this intrusion that we're seeing, or the possibility of it, what would those be? And I appreciate, again, all your experience.
Thank you for your leadership and service. I would say that incorporating into MEDC a requirement, if you are involving any prospective development with a country of concern, China, Iran, Russia, Venezuela, Cuba, North Korea, that it must be subjected to a CFIUS review through the Department of Treasury. That should be step one. And if they are not given what's known as safe harbor, then I think the provision should be in there that would, they're not given safe harbor, the deal should not go forward, because that means there is a red flag, a threat that Intel, military, other entities know that is clear and present and could jeopardize our national security. So, and I would explore, this is a kind of a sovereignty issue and jurisdictional issue. I would confer with your legal team about what might be set up, because administrations come and go, and sometimes CFIUS is more of a muscular approach. Sometimes it's more of a frail approach. I think it's doing a good job. I think under the Trump administration, I don't think it's premature on their work in the second Trump administration, but very strong in the first. I'm encouraged what direction they're going in this. But I would see what you might be able to do, what legislators or perhaps the MEDC might be able to be read into in terms of threats, short of having security clearances. They may be permitted to see enough, but not anything on what's known as the high side, if you will, the classified side. So those are a couple of thoughts there, I think, that could really have our footing commensurate with the threat. And Michigan, I think, in so many ways, you all are leading the way, and I'm really grateful for it on a bipartisan basis. It's very exemplary.
Very good. Thank you for your testimony, Ambassador Silo. I appreciate having you in.
Thanks for the opportunity.
And just one quick note to make here. Barry Wayne Adams voices his opposition to the mega site. Appreciate the time that Barry has taken to talk with myself as well as Marjorie when we had that conversation last week. So thank you to the two of you for that. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Chair Bruck.
All right, for the Homeland Security Foreign Influence Committee, there being no further business before the committee, we stand adjourned.
There being no further business before the Corporate Subsidies and State Investments Committee, we also stand adjourned.